Tonga is the only kingdom on earth where the throne and the temple sit side by side, where a monarchy built on ancient lineage quietly bends toward a modern American faith, and where the question is no longer, why did so many Tongans become Latter-day Saints? The question is Tonga slowly becoming the world's first Mormon nation? This is the story of a kingdom transformed not by conquest, not by revolution, but by conversion. A small island monarchy in the heart of the Pacific, a people rooted in tradition, hierarchy, and royal loyalty, and a religion built on priesthood, order, and eternal families. This is the unlikely union between the House of Tupou and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is the Mormon monarchy of Tonga. Chapter 1. The only kingdom Mormonism ever touched. Tonga stands alone in the global Mormon story, not as a footnote, not as a mission field, but as the only surviving Polynesian kingdom where a foreign faith was not merely preached, it was adopted, absorbed, reshaped, and eventually woven so tightly into national identity that it became impossible to speak of modern Tonga without speaking, at least indirectly, of Mormonism. In the 19th century, most Pacific islands were carved apart by whichever colonial power reached their shores first. European governments imposed their languages, their legal systems, their churches, and often their entire cultural worldview. Communities that had once followed their chiefs suddenly found themselves answering to foreign magistrates and unfamiliar religions. But Tonga resisted colonization. Its kings held the line with a mixture of diplomacy, force, and cultural confidence that was rare in the Pacific. They negotiated, they pushed back, and they protected the monarchy with a determination that preserved something priceless, a political structure untouched by European rule. And because Tonga preserved its monarchy, religion there never operated as a loose social choice. It was not an individual spiritual marketplace. It flowed downward from authority, from chiefs, from nobles, from the royal household itself. Spiritual identity was inseparable from political belonging. So when Mormon missionaries arrived, they did not enter a blank slate. They stepped into a society where conversion carried real political consequence. If a chief converted, his household followed. If a noble family shifted direction, an entire district, its marriages, its land decisions, its family alliances could realign overnight. Unlike other nations, where missionaries preached to scattered individuals hoping to win a few hearts at a time, Mormonism in Tonga operated inside a living hierarchy that shaped everything: land rights, kinship ties, marriage negotiations, loyalty obligations, and personal identity. The church was not just planting congregations, it was interacting with a functioning traditional system that amplified every decision. By the late 20th century, church leaders recognized that Tonga was not merely a mission post. It was a strategic stronghold in the Pacific, a place where the faith grew not by slow accumulation but by waves of collective conversion. Missionaries were trained here. Church media programs were recorded here. Educational, humanitarian, and welfare systems quietly penetrated every corner of the kingdom. In many ways, Tonga became the church's Pacific Jerusalem, a spiritual capital whose influence extended far beyond its size, shaping Mormon identity throughout Polynesia and radiating outward into the wider Pacific world. Chapter 2. The Royal Family and the New Faith. No story about Mormonism in Tonga is complete without the crown. The House of Tupou, one of the most enduring and culturally powerful royal families in the modern world, became intertwined with Latter-day Saint influence in ways that historians still struggle to categorize. Not because the entire monarchy converted, but because the lines between religious interest, political friendship, and cultural exchange blurred in a way that is uniquely Tongan. Some members of the royal lineage embraced the church. Others attended church-run schools where they were exposed to Mormon teachers, values, and leadership models. Many maintained deep personal friendships with missionaries, church leaders, and American Latter-day Saint communities who treated Tongan royals with a mixture of reverence, curiosity, and admiration. Several young nobles studied in LDS institutions abroad, in Utah, in Hawaii, in church-run academies, forming loyalties and worldviews that lasted a lifetime. To understand the power of this influence, you have to understand Tonga itself. The monarchy is not ceremonial. It is the beating heart of the nation. Its authority is ancestral, sacred, and wrapped in centuries of divine legitimacy. A command from the royal household is not merely political. It vibrates through society as something spiritual, something inherited, something binding. Now imagine a religion arriving that teaches a similar truth. That leadership is holy. That authority is divine. That lineage is eternal. That kingdoms and families continue beyond death, bound by covenants that stretch into eternity. The LDS priesthood system and the Tongan monarchy share a theological architecture that is almost uncanny. Both claim sacred authority rooted in ancestry or divine ordination. Both divide leadership into layered ranks, callings, stewardships, and councils. Both operate through networks of advisors, kinship alliances, extended family responsibilities, and structured governance. This spiritual symmetry made Mormonism uniquely comfortable, even familiar for Tonga's elite. Where other Christian denominations often clashed with the existing hierarchy, Mormonism aligned with it. Where some churches preached equality that undermined noble authority, Latter-day Saints preached divine order, stewardship, and eternal hierarchy, concepts that resonated perfectly with Tongan political culture. When a Tongan king or noble attended a church ceremony, the symbolism was profound. It was not just a visit, it was a national signal. It told the people that this foreign faith was not an outsider intruding on tradition, it was a guest welcomed into the highest house of the land. And in Tonga, royal favor is not merely a gesture. It is a gravitational force that can reshape the religious landscape of an entire kingdom. Chapter 3. The Great Tongan Conversion Wave. By the late 20th century, Tonga experienced one of the most rapid and concentrated waves of religious conversion anywhere in the modern world. Not a trickle, not a slow burn. An eruption, a sweeping generational shift that historians still struggle to quantify. Villages that had been Methodist for generations suddenly found half their families attending Mormon meetings. Entire genealogical lines tied for centuries to specific churches altered their spiritual identity within a single decade. In some districts, the church became the dominant faith almost overnight, reshaping social rhythms, community leadership, and the fabric of village life. This was not accidental. It was not luck. It was the result of a missionary approach in Tonga that had little resemblance to the traditional Western model. Missionaries in Tonga did not simply preach. They embedded themselves. They lived inside Tongan communities. They learned the language with precision and emotion, mastering its proverbs, its humor, its formal speech. They approached families, not isolated individuals. They honored chiefs, matriarchs, elders, and the intricate hierarchy that ordered every village. They ate what the community ate. They slept where the community slept. They respected the sacred role of hospitality. And Tongans noticed. More importantly, they respected it. At the same time, the church invested heavily in education, one of the most powerful social forces in the Pacific. Schools were built in strategic villages. Scholarships were offered to promising students. English training programs opened doors to employment abroad, especially in New Zealand, Australia, and the United States. Families who joined the church quickly found themselves connected to a global network, a pathway to mobility, to new skills, to migration, to financial stability, a way to secure futures their ancestors might not have imagined. And as more Tongans emigrated to Utah, Hawaii, and California, they became powerful cultural anchors for the faith. They returned home carrying stronger, more defined Mormon identities. They brought back stories, resources, leadership styles, and a sense of belonging to something global, something bigger than an island chain of 170 islands in the South Pacific. This return migration reinforced the cycle. Every converted household strengthened the next. Every child who attended a church, school, or seminary reinforced the growing Mormon culture. Every family that sent a missionary abroad expanded the visibility of Latter-day Saint identity. By the dawn of the 21st century, Tonga had one of the highest per capita Latter-day Saint populations on Earth, higher, in some areas, than Utah itself. Missionaries called Tonga the Miracle Nation. Sociologists called it a religious realignment unprecedented in the Pacific. But for Tongans, It was something simpler, a spiritual movement that felt aligned with their culture, their hierarchy, their emphasis on family, and their identity as a people. A wave of faith that moved the entire kingdom. Chapter 4. Why Tongan culture and Mormonism fit perfectly. To understand why Mormonism flourished in Tonga, you must first understand the architecture of Tongan life, not just its customs, but its emotional geometry. Tonga is communal at its core. Families stretch across generations, woven like thick ropes that bind households, villages, and clans into a single living organism. Kinship is not merely biological. It is social duty, spiritual loyalty, and daily responsibility. Hierarchy is sacred, not symbolic, but functional. Chiefs, nobles, matapule, and elders carry genuine authority, and their words shape the rhythms of the community. Deference is not viewed as weakness. It is a form of harmony. Loyalty is non-negotiable, the invisible glue that keeps order, respect, and unity in place. At the center of this cultural world sits the Tongan heart, defined by respect for family, reverence for ancestors, generosity without condition, and a lifelong commitment to serve others before oneself. Now place the LDS worldview alongside this, and the alignment becomes unmistakable. Mormonism reflects the same contours, a church grounded in priesthood quorums, where leadership is layered, orderly, and sacred. A family system that is eternal, interconnected, and spiritually expansive. A culture that elevates obedience, reverence, and collective welfare above the desires of the individual. Its missionary program is built on discipline and sacrifice values that resonate naturally with island traditions of service, duty, and honor. And its congregational structure ensures that every member has a calling, a purpose, a contribution. Teacher, minister, leader, servant. In a society where everyone already plays a role in village life, this felt familiar, even intuitive. For Tongans, Mormonism did not feel like a Western religion arriving from distant shores. It felt like the spiritual blueprint they already lived by, formalized, organized, and extended into eternity. Then add the church's global system, welfare programs that strengthen families in times of need, humanitarian aid that supports villages after cyclones, educational institutions that open doors far beyond the Pacific, and international networks that create pathways for education, migration, and achievement. In Tonga, the church offered not only theology, but structure, identity, aspiration, community, and upward mobility. It gave Tongans a spiritual home that matched their cultural DNA, while also giving them a global stage. It was not just a religion, it became a pathway. Chapter 5. The Temple and the Methodist Tension. For generations, Tonga was not simply a Methodist kingdom in name, it was Methodist in its bones. Methodism arrived early, shaped the monarchy, guided social norms, and became the spiritual architecture of Tongan society. It structured village life, influenced political decisions, and provided the moral vocabulary through which Tongans understood duty, humility, and communal belonging. The faith was woven into every important passage of life. Funerals filled with hymns, weddings blessed by familiar rituals, chieftain titles confirmed under Methodist eyes, and national ceremonies carried out with Methodist reverence. It was the spiritual soundtrack of the nation. So when Mormonism surged, it did not rise quietly or politely. It rose in open competition with the established faith. Entire families found themselves pulled in two directions: Methodist traditions on one side, Latter-day Saint conviction on the other. Grandparents remained loyal to the old order, while their grandchildren began preparing for missionary service and marching toward the temple. What once were purely family matters became religious negotiations. Because Tonga is intensely communal, these spiritual divisions spilled into every corner of life. Land rights were debated along religious lines. Marriage alliances were questioned or rearranged. Community feasts became conversations about which church would take precedence. Even village leadership and political loyalties shifted subtly depending on whether one stood with the Methodist establishment or the rising Mormon movement. When the LDS Temple was built in Tonga, it was far more than a house of worship. It was a proclamation carved into the skyline, a visual declaration that a new spiritual kingdom had planted itself firmly in the heart of an already deeply Christian nation. The temple's white spire rose as a rival landmark to Methodist chapels that had dominated the landscape for over a century. To Methodists, it signaled a challenge, a reminder that the religious monopoly they once held was gone. To Latter-day Saints, it represented destiny proof that their faith was no longer an outsider's religion, but a permanent pillar of Tongan identity. And so the tension grew, not in open conflict, but in symbols, loyalties, identity, and generational momentum. The struggle moved across decades, expressed through who controlled ceremonies, who led communities, and which faith guided the dreams of the youth. Today, the Methodists still hold history, tradition, and ancestral memory. But the Latter-day Saints hold the energy of youth, global diaspora, mobility, education, and cultural expansion. The struggle remains subtle but unmistakably real. Chapter 6. The future is Tonga becoming a Mormon nation? The story of Tonga is still unfolding, not in quiet chapters, but in an accelerating transformation that stretches far beyond the Pacific horizon. Tongan communities abroad, especially in Utah, Hawaii, and California, have evolved into cultural and spiritual powerhouses. These are not just pockets of immigration. They are extensions of the kingdom itself, vibrant outposts of Polynesian identity, fused with deep Latter-day Saint conviction. From these communities flow missionaries who return home with refined faith and disciplined training. Families abroad send money, resources, leadership, and influence back to the islands. They organize conferences, youth programs, temple trips, and cultural festivals that reinforce and even reshape the LDS identity of Tongan families. In many ways, these diaspora communities act as a spiritual bridge connecting the ancient rhythms of the Pacific with the institutional heartlands of American Mormonism. And with each passing generation, that bridge grows stronger. Young Tongans now grow up with relatives serving in Utah stake presidencies, teaching institute classes in Hawaii, or leading powerful Tongan wards in California. Their sense of spiritual belonging is no longer confined to village chapels or island traditions. Their world is global, interconnected, cross-continental, a spiritual web strengthened by international kinship networks. This creates a potent cultural feedback loop. Tongans abroad reinforce Mormon identity at home. Tongans at home raise new converts who later migrate abroad. Those converts then strengthen diaspora communities. And the cycle continues, tightening with every generation. In effect, Tonga is developing a dual identity, one rooted in ancient Polynesian royalty, with its chiefs, nobles, and centuries-old lineage, and another rising from the global might of Mormon culture, leadership structures, missionary zeal, and transnational family systems. Which brings us to the question no historian, theologian, or sociologist can ignore. Is Tonga on the path to becoming the world's first culturally Mormon nation? Not officially, perhaps. Not in constitution. Not in political decree. But in practice, in identity, in family structure, community life, and generational loyalty? The trajectory is hard to deny. Tonga may be the closest the church has ever come to having a nation that feels like a spiritual homeland, a kingdom where tradition and restoration walk side by side, shaping a future unlike any other in the Pacific or the world. The crown of Tonga and the priesthood of Utah were never meant to meet. Yet, in the vast blue Pacific, a kingdom found its twin, a monarchy and a church, a throne and a temple, and a people who built a bridge between ancient tradition and modern faith. If you want more deep dives into how Mormonism reshaped nations, identities, and history itself, subscribe to The Chronist, turn on notifications, and stay with this journey. Because the story of the Mormon world is much bigger and much stranger than anyone ever told you.